Aileen Carol Wuornos was an American serial killer and prostitute who murdered 7 men in Florida in 1989 and 1990. Wuornos was born Aileen Carol Pittman, in Rochester, Michigan, on February 29, 1956. Her mother Diane Wuornos was 14 years old when she married Aileen's father, 18-year-old Leo Dale Pittman, on June 3, 1954. Aileen's older brother Keith was born on March 14, 1955. After less than 2 years of marriage, and 2 months before Aileen was born, Diane filed for divorce. Wuornos never met her father, as he was incarcerated at the time of her birth. Leo Dale Pittman was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was later convicted of sex crimes against children. He committed suicide by hanging in prison on January 30, 1969. In January 1960, when Wuornos was almost 4 years old, Diane abandoned her children, leaving them with their maternal grandparents, Laurie and Britta Wuornos, who were both alcoholics. They legally adopted Keith and Aileen on March 18, 1960. By the age of 11, Wuornos began engaging in sexual activities in school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food. She had also engaged in sexual activities with her brother. Wuornos said that her alcoholic grandfather had sexually assaulted and beaten her when she was a child. Before beating her, he would force her to strip out of her clothes. In 1970, at age 14, she became pregnant, having been raped by an accomplice of her grandfather. Wuornos gave birth to a boy at a home for unwed mothers on March 23, 1971, and the child was placed for adoption. A few months after her son was born, she dropped out of school at about the same time that her grandmother died of liver failure. When Wuornos was 15, her grandfather threw her out of the house, and she began supporting herself through sex work and living in the woods near her old home. On May 27, 1974, at age 18, Wuornos was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado, for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. She was later charged with failure to appear. In 1976, Wuornos hitchhiked to Florida, where she met 69-year-old yacht club president, Louis Gratz-Fell. They married quickly, and the announcement of their nuptials was printed in the local newspaper's society pages. However, Wuornos continually involved herself in confrontations at their local bar, and went to jail briefly for assault. She also hit Fell with his own cane, leading him to gain a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. She returned to Michigan, where on July 14, 1976, she was arrested at Bernie's Club in Mansalona, in Antrim County, and charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head. On July 17, her brother Keith died of esophageal cancer, and Wuornos received $10,000 from his life insurance. Wuornos and Fell annulled their marriage on July 21 after only 9 weeks. In August 1976, Wuornos was given a $105 fine for drunk driving. She used the money inherited from her brother to pay the fine, and spent the rest within 2 months buying luxuries, including a new car, which she wrecked shortly afterwards. On May 20, 1981, Wuornos was arrested in Edgewater, Florida, for the armed robbery of a convenience store, where she stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. She was sentenced to prison on May 4, 1982, and released on June 30, 1983. On January 4, 1986, Wuornos was arrested in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice for providing identification bearing her aunt's name. Miami police officers found a .38 caliber revolver and a box of ammunition in the stolen car. On June 2, 1986, Volusia County deputy sheriffs detained Wuornos for questioning, after a male companion accused her of pulling a gun in his car and demanding $200. Wuornos was found to be carrying spare ammunition, and police discovered a .22 pistol under the passenger seat she had occupied. Around this time, Wuornos met Tyria Moore, a hotel maid, at a Daytona Beach lesbian bar. They moved in together, and Wuornos supported them with her earnings as a sex worker. On July 4, 1987, Daytona Beach police detained Wuornos and Moore at a bar, for questioning regarding an incident in which they were accused of assault and battery with a beer bottle. On November 30, 1989, Wuornos shot and killed 51-year-old Richard Charles Mallory, an electronics store owner in Clearwater. Mallory had previously been convicted for attempted rape, and she claimed to have killed him in self-defense. Wuornos claimed she was sodomized and brutally beaten, after being driven to an abandoned area for sexual requests. 2 days later, a Volusia County deputy sheriff found Mallory's abandoned vehicle. On December 13, his body was found several miles away in a wooded area. He had been shot several times, and 2 bullets to the left lung were declared the cause of death. Wuornos then murdered 47-year-old David Andrew Spears, on an unknown date. He was a construction worker in Winter Garden. He was declared missing as of May 19, 1990. On June 1, 1990, his naked body was found along U.S. Route 19, in Florida in Citrus County. He had been shot 6 times by a .22 caliber pistol. 40-year-old Charles Edmund Carshaden, a part-time rodeo worker, was murdered on May 31, 1990. On June 6, 1990, his body was found in Pasco County. He had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber weapon. The body had been wrapped in an electric blanket and was badly decomposing when found. Witnesses saw Wuornos in possession of Carshaden's car, and Wuornos had also pawned a gun identified as belonging to Carshaden. In June 1990, 65-year-old Peter Abraham Seams left Jupiter, Florida, for Arkansas. On July 4, 1990, his car was found in Orange Springs, Florida. Moore and Wuornos were seen abandoning the car, and Wuornos's palm print was found on the interior door handle. His body was never found. On July 31, 1990, 50-year-old Troy Eugene Burris, age 50, was reported missing. On August 4, 1990, his body was found in a wooded area along State Road 19 in Marion County. He had been shot 2 times. Charles Richard Humphreys, age 56, was murdered on September 11, 1990. He was a retired U.S. Air Force major, former state child abuse investigator, and former chief of police. On September 12, 1990, his body was found in Marion County. He was fully clothed and had been shot 6 times in the head and torso. His car was found in Suwannee County. Walter Geno Antonio, age 62, was murdered on an unknown date. He was a trucker, security guard, and reserve police officer. On November 19, 1990, Antonio's nearly naked body was found near a remote logging road in Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, his car was found in Brevard County. On July 4, 1990, Wuornos and Moore abandoned victim Peter C.M.'s car, after they were involved in an accident. Witnesses who had seen the women driving the victim's car provided police with the names and descriptions, resulting in a media campaign to locate them. Police also found some of the victim's belongings in pawn shops, and retrieved fingerprints matching those found in the victim's car. Wuornos had a criminal record in Florida, and her fingerprints were on file. On January 9, 1991, Wuornos was arrested on an outstanding warrant at the Last Resort, a biker bar in Volusia County. Police located Moore the next day in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She agreed to elicit a confession from Wuornos in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Moore returned with the police to Florida, where she was put up in a motel. Under police guidance, she made numerous telephone calls to Wuornos, pleading for help in clearing her name. 3 days later, on January 16, 1991, Wuornos confessed to the murders. She claimed the men had tried to rape her, and she killed them in self-defense. A year later, on January 14, 1992, Wuornos went to trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory. Although previous convictions are normally inadmissible in criminal trials, under Florida's Williams rule, the prosecution was allowed to introduce evidence related to her other crimes to show a pattern of illegal activity. On January 27, 1992, Wuornos was convicted of Mallory's murder with help from Moore's testimony. At her sentencing, psychiatrists for the defense testified that Wuornos was mentally unstable, and diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. 4 days later, she was sentenced to death. Wuornos's defense made efforts during the trial to introduce evidence of Richard Charles Mallory's prior charge of intent to commit rape in Maryland and his commitment to a maximum security correctional facility, providing remediation to sexual offenders. Records obtained from the correctional institution showed that from 1958 to 1962, Mallory was committed for treatment and observation resulting from a criminal charge of assault with intent to commit rape, and he received 8 years of treatment from the facility. In 1961, it was observed of Mr. Mallory that he possessed strong sociopathic trends. However, the judge refused to allow the records to be admitted in court as evidence, and denied Wuornos's request for a retrial. On March 31, 1992, Wuornos pleaded no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears, saying she wanted to get right with God. In her statement to the court, she said, in part, "I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me as I've told you, but these others did not. They only began to start to." On May 15, 1992, Wuornos was given 3 more death sentences. In June 1992, Wuornos pleaded guilty to the murder of Charles Edmund Carshaden. In November 1992, she received her 5th death sentence. In February 1993, Wuornos pleaded guilty to the murder of Walter Geno Antonio, and was sentenced to death again. No charges were brought against her for the murder of Peter Abraham Seams, as his body was never found. In all, Wuornos received 6 death sentences. Wuornos told several inconsistent stories about the killings. She claimed initially that all 7 men had raped her, while she was working as a sex worker, but later recanted the claim of self-defense, citing robbery and a desire to leave no witnesses as the reason for murder. During an interview with filmmaker Nick Broomfield, when she thought the cameras were off, Wuornos told him that it was in fact self-defense, but she could not stand being on death row where she had been for 10 years at that point, and wanted to die. Wuornos's crimes are considered by some specialists to be consistent with the psychopathology model of women who kill. She was considered to have a psychopathic personality. Using the psychopathy checklist, Wuornos was found to have a psychopathic personality with a PCLR score of 32, with the cutoff score for psychopathy being 30 in the United States. Wuornos also allegedly met the criteria for both borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Much of Wuornos's childhood sexual abuse and career in sex work are said to have irrevocably damaged her, and it could be seen that traumatic experiences throughout most of her young life could play a part in Wuornos's psychological state, including her biological mother's departure, as well as her grandmother ignoring the abuse she endured from her grandfather, thus leading to the lack of development of a mother-daughter bond for Wuornos as a young girl. The damage was then made worse, because both Wuornos and her brother believed that their grandparents were their biological parents, but at the age of 11 they learned that this was not the case, which further damaged the relationship between Wuornos and her adoptive parents. Wuornos was also known to have early behavioral problems, such as having an explosive temper which limited her ability to make friends, as well as making it increasingly difficult for her to maintain relationships. Her traumatic upbringing, including her physical and sexual abuse, have been partially linked to the development of her borderline personality disorder. Wuornos was incarcerated at the Florida Department of Corrections Broward Correctional Institution death row for women, then transferred to the Florida State Prison for execution. Her appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court was denied in 1996. In a 2001 petition to the Florida Supreme Court, she stated her intention to dismiss her legal counsel and terminate all pending appeals. She wrote, "I killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice. And I'd do it again too. There's no chance in keeping me alive or anything, because I'd kill again. I have hate crawling through my system, I am so sick of hearing this she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again." While her attorneys argued that she was not mentally competent to make such a request, Wuornos insisted that she knew what she was doing, and a court-appointed panel of psychiatrists agreed. In 2002, Wuornos began accusing prison matrons of tainting her food with dirt, saliva, and urine. She said she had overheard conversations among prison personnel, trying to get her so pushed over the brink, so she would wind up committing suicide before the execution. She also complained of strip searches, tight handcuffing, door kicking, frequent window checks, low water pressure, mildew on her mattress, and cat calling. Wuornos threatened to boycott showers and food trays when certain officers were on duty. Her attorney stated that Miss Wuornos really just wants to have proper treatment, humane treatment until the day she's executed. In the weeks before her execution, Wuornos gave a series of interviews to Broomfield, and talked about being taken away to meet God and Jesus, and the angels and whatever is beyond the beyond. In her final interview, she once again charged that her mind was tortured at BCI, and her head crushed by sonic pressure. Wuornos said food poisonings and other abuses worsened each time she complained, with the goal of making her appear insane, or to drive her insane. She also turned on her interviewer saying, she was sabotaged by society, the cops, and the system. She continued, a raped woman got executed, and was used for books and movies. Her final words on camera were, "Thanks a lot society, for railroading my ass." Dawn Botkins, a childhood friend of Wuornos, later told Broomfield that her verbal abuse was directed at society and the media in general, not at him specifically. Wuornos's execution took place on October 9, 2002. She declined her last meal, which could have been anything under $20, and opted for a cup of coffee instead. Her last words were, "Yes, I would just like to say, I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus June 6, like the movie. Big mothership and all, I'll be back, I'll be back." She died at 9:47 a.m., Eastern Daylight Savings Time. She was the 10th woman in the United States and the second in Florida to be executed since the 1976 United States Supreme Court decision restoring capital punishment. Wuornos's body was cremated, and her ashes were spread beneath a tree in her native Michigan, by her childhood friend Dawn Botkins. Wuornos requested that Natalie Merchant's song Carnival be played at her funeral. Thanks for watching. For more videos please click like and subscribe.